Quote, I have a blockbuster Trump story. 6 words that would put in motion just about everything that happened next. A scramble from Trump allies to suppress a story that could have landed like a bombshell in the 2016 campaign. Those words were in a text message sent from Keith Davidson. Keith Davidson is the attorney for both of the women at the heart of the story, Playboy playmate Karen McDougal and porn star Stormy Daniels. It was a text sent to then editor of the National Enquirer, Dylan Howard. Now, we mention this because Davidson is on the stand right now on day 9 of the Donald Trump election interference hush money trial, with explosive testimony being given right now about his dealings with AMI and Donald Trump's innermost circle. Earlier today, he told the court and the jury that Dylan Howard texted him back a response, quote, talk first thing. I will get you more than anyone for it. You know why. Davidson says that he understood even back then that the owner of the National Enquirer, AMI owner David Pecker, and Donald Trump were good friends. Just 2 weeks after those texts were exchanged, Karen McDougal met with Dylan Howard. It was where Karen McDougal alleged that she had an affair with Donald Trump that went on for, quote, several weeks to months. Now, AMI initially declined to pick up McDougal's story, returning to the bargaining table for it only when ABC News wanted it. They expressed interest in talking to McDougal. But what ABC wanted was for her to tell her story, something McDougal didn't want to do, Davidson testified. Now, in late July, Dylan Howard texted Davidson, quote, get me a price on McDougal, all in, consulting gig, perhaps as a fitness expert thrown into the mix. With Karen McDougal deciding between going public with her story with ABC News or signing a deal to bury her story with the National Enquirer, Dylan Howard wrote her lawyer, Keith Davidson, this, quote, we are going to lay it on thick for her. To which her lawyer, Keith Davidson, said, quote, good. Throw in an ambassadorship for me. I'm thinking Isle of Man, a joke referring to the fact that Karen McDougal's deal with AMI would help Donald Trump, who was running for president. And when the deal was finally done, Keith Davidson said he called Michael Cohen. He said, out of, quote, professional courtesy, to tell him that a deal involving Michael Cohen's client, Donald Trump, had closed. So then it came time for Keith Davidson to describe what happened with his other client, of course, Stormy Daniels. Davidson told the jury today that the release of the Access Hollywood tape breathed new life into Stormy Daniels' allegations that she'd had an affair. He testified that that tape, quote, had tremendous influence on the appeal of Stormy's story. He said that it then fell to him to negotiate the deal to silence Stormy Daniels with Michael Cohen once AMI backed out. The attorney representing both Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal pulling the curtain back on how the entire scheme to suppress stories that would have damaged Donald Trump is where we begin today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. With us at the table, former U.S. Attorney and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Harry Litman's here. He was back inside the courthouse today. Also back at the table, special correspondent for The Hollywood Reporter, Lachlan Cartwright, is back with us. He's the former executive editor for American Media Inc., AMI. He worked with David Pecker and Dylan Howard. Also joining us, former top official at the Department of Justice, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman. And at the courthouse for us, once again, NBC News correspondent, my friend Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, I start with you. This was another day where every time I read my notes, I had to stop. I was that person on the sidewalk, right, staring at my phone. Some really gobsmackingly extraordinary new information for people on the outside of the hush money scheme. Talk about the testimony today.
Right. In the text messages that were transferred between Keith Davidson, who was the attorney representing Stormy Daniels, and Michael Cohen, and Dylan Howard, the editor-in-chief of the National Enquirer, just bringing us in real time, hour by hour, as these deliberations were unfolding, particularly around the reveal of the Access Hollywood tape and the suggestion that the campaign was all but over at that point. But I think an important takeaway here, was the conversation, Nicole, that you and I, we were all having coming into this trial. What corroborating testimony and evidence would there be to Michael Cohen? We now have David Pecker and Keith Davidson, who are corroborating and providing backing to the claims that Michael Cohen has made publicly heading into this trial here. And just Keith Davidson, just this afternoon alone, makes a direct reference to Donald Trump as part of the Karen McDougal arrangement. As part of the contract in paragraph 3, the prosecution asked Keith Davidson the question that, quote, Karen grants her life rights to the subject manager regarding an affair she had with a married man. Was there a particular married man you understood this to apply to? Davidson responded, yes. Asked who? Davidson responded, Donald Trump, as it pertained to Stormy Daniels. On October 11, 2016, Stormy Daniels had entered into a contract through Keith Davidson with Michael Cohen. And as part of that, there were pseudonyms that were given, not only to Stormy Daniels, Peggy Peterson, but also a pseudonym, David Dennison. Who is David Dennison? Well, that individual was identified explicitly by Keith Davidson today as being Donald Trump. So now the jury has heard from this individual who says that Donald Trump was a party to this contract. Whether he was explicitly a part of it, that is still wait to be seen from Keith Davidson. But we know that he is so far providing detailed testimony about his conversations with Dylan Howard, the editor-in-chief of the National Enquirer, and Michael Cohen. And we should expect testimony, even here within the next half hour, about October 27th, those literal days when Michael Cohen and Donald Trump were on the phone as the wire transfer was being initiated. These are details that Keith Davidson, for the first time, could begin to publicly share here and in front of the jury, Nicole.
And Vaughn, you were traveling with Mike Pence. I was here in the studio most days covering these final frantic days of the campaign alongside our former colleague, Brian Williams. I remember each of these news cycles, and I think it's time to probably build out this timeline. I want to turn to our lawyers on what you just articulated, but I want to ask you one more question about the work that the prosecution did laying out motive. And it's this thing that wasn't unspoken. It was spoken. It was about ambassadorships. Now, who gives ambassadorships? Only one human being on planet Earth gives American ambassadorships, and they're the American president. Let me read you this. This is from a text message from Dylan. Quote, we're going to lay it on thick for her, Karen McDougal. At this point, Karen was teetering between two competing deals, and we had requested a meeting where each entity could make a pitch as to why they were the correct avenue for Karen. How did you respond? Good. Throw in an ambassadorship for me. I'm thinking Isle of Man. Prosecutor asked what that meant. Quote, I was making a joke. I don't think the Isle of Man is even a country or that they have an ambassador. It was a reference to Trump's candidacy. What did you mean by that? Question. Answer from Keith Davidson. Quote, this would help his candidacy. Question from the prosecutor. Is it safe to assume that from your joke, that it was your belief that if you were this close to a deal, it would somehow benefit the candidate, Donald Trump? Keith Davidson, yes.
We're going to lay it on thick. That was one of the text messages. We're going to lay it on thick for her to execute this deal. You know, you've been a part of campaigns. I've covered a number of them. And if anybody covering these campaigns or the public at large should become familiar with the details, right? Legality aside, right? Just politically here, of the lengths to which somebody is going through in order to tamp down or cover up a story, it's laid out in the form of those text messages that we were not all privy to in 2016. These didn't come into light until well into Donald Trump's presidency. And so, you know, when you ask about the stakes here and right, joking about an ambassadorship, real or not, I think that for us, you know, I was just talking with producer Dan, I was on the road with back in 2016 as we were going through all of this. And if we had known in real time the lengths to which Donald Trump, and perhaps even Mike Pence knew the lengths to which Donald Trump was going to suppress these salacious stories about him, I think that perhaps the country would be at a different point in its reckoning with where it finds itself and its moral compass when it comes to our politics today than it does here in the year of 2024.
Yeah, I mean, and that, Lachlan, is like the $64 million question that we'll have to grapple with forever. And I think in the opening, the prosecutors lay that out as, you know, we'll never know. Right. We'll never know the political impact of the suppression of these stories, the silencing of these women. But we do know from this testimony today that Trump's motive was to keep them away from the voters. I want to read a little bit more from the exchanges between Dylan Howard, who we talked about last week, who's unavailable to come to New York and be part of this trial because of some health issues, right?
Spinal injuries is what has been told to the jury.
And Keith Davidson. So they put up for the jury a July 28th, 2016 text message between Dylan Howard and Keith Davidson that says, "I need this to happen." Prosecutors say, "How did you interpret that?" Keith Davidson says, "I suppose I interpreted it as he, Dylan Howard, wanted it to happen." It being the deal between Karen McDougal and AMI, asked the prosecutors. Keith Davidson, "Yes, sir." The need for Karen McDougal to go with AMI isn't just competitive, is it? It's about what would happen to her story about Trump.
And you can sense the urgency here in the messages going back and forth. I mean, Dylan Howard loved texting, and I can almost hear his voice as these texts are read in court. But there is this situation going on with ABC and Keith Davidson's almost playing off ABC against AMI. But there is this urgency to make sure that Karen McDougal's story is purchased off the market and by American media.
Tell